Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of the Quail N Crux. This audio podcast as part of the Ricochet and Ruckus. This audio podcast is part of the Shitstorm Squadron. This audio podcast is part of the Bedlam and Labostix, and this audio podcast is part of a ZtormLabostix production. So through this audio podcast today, looking at and as part of this Ricochet and Ruckus audio podcast series. I look at the epidemiology now, some of the epidemiology in around Huntington's. So Huntington's is relatively rare. Is a relatively rare autosomal dominant neurodegenerative disorder or condition. Yet its prevalence sort of demonstrates significant variation across different ethnicities and geographic populations. Evidence indicates or informs that amongst individuals in Europe of European ancestry, the estimated prevalence ranges from in around approximately 5 to around 12 cases per 100,000, corresponding to roughly 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 20,000, 1 in 20,000 of populations, where lower prevalence figures such as approximately 0.5 cases per 100,000 have been reported in the African and Asian populations. A recent some evidence in the form of a systematic review or publication and meta-analyses encompassing around 33 epidemiological investigations conducted between 2010 and 2022 reported a global prevalence of around just under 5 around just under 5 per 100,000, 4.88 per 100,000, and where with the highest regional estimates actually observed or identified in identified in Europe and in North America, and the lowest in Africa and East Asia. The findings are reported studies or investigations from European populations have documented and evidence documented prevalence rates ranging from around just over 10.5 to 13.7 per 100,000 amongst individuals of European descent. A recent investigation in the United Kingdom had shown approximately 1 in 8,000 cases, with some regional variants. In the United States, specifically, epidemiological modeling estimates that approximately inform that approximately 25,000 to 30,000 individuals have Huntington's, whilst 150,000 to in around 250,000 individuals are or can be at risk for Huntington's by carrying the pathogenic Huntington's allele. That being so there will be, just to iterate quickly, that there will be some aspects in around the genetics in this audio podcast series, just to iterate that an allele is aligned to where for example, in amongst the DNA and amongst acid base and acid base pairs, in amongst genetics, it is where, for example, the condition is not fully expressed in amongst the DNA to actually thus propagate the actual condition itself per se. But there is expression where, for example, where populations or people diagnosed or suspect or high risk can carry the HD the Huntington's allele. So that's what this sort of iterates in around. Juvenile Huntington's represents a small yet variable population of all Huntington's cases, with meta-analyses reporting a range of 1 to 15%, 1 to 15% of cases, and historically an estimate of approximately 4 to 10 cases per 100,000 in the Caucasian population have been sort of observed whilst ethnic and geographic variations exist, such as the Asian and African population prevalence reported with lower have been reported amongst the evidence in literature, and with lower sort of prevalences compared to Western European and some American populations. Collectively, data sort of inform that although Huntington's is considered sort of uncommon globally, its epidemiological burden is disproportionately higher amongst population of Caucasian ancestry and varies significantly across ethnic and regional lines. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of the Quail and Crux. This audio podcast as part of the Ricochet and Ruckus. This audio podcast as part of the Shitstorm Squadron. And this audio podcast as part of the Bedlam and Labostix. And this audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix production.